Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to talk to you about interval training, or otherwise known as ear training. And in case this video is titled Interval Ear Training, and what that's about, and how it can help you to learn how to be better at writing things. What I mean by that is interval training is all about being able to recognize intervals when you hear them. Interval, in this case, is the distance between one note and another note. For example, this distance is what's called a major third. There are a bunch of intervals. I'll just quickly lay them out for you. There are more than this, but we'll talk about what they are in a second. But these are the basic ones that you want to know about. If you look at a music theory book or any kind of websites, they might throw in an extra one at the beginning here, which they'll refer to as a unison, which we actually use kind of a lot, but it basically just means more than one voice playing the same note. So here we have our various intervals. They have their names, and they are a minor second, a major second, minor third, major third. You see a pattern here, and then it gets immediately destroyed by having a perfect fourth, a tritone, a perfect fifth, a minor sixth, minor seven, major seven, and an octave. So those are the various intervals, and don't worry too much about trying to remember the names of them right now, but the point of ear training is that when you hear the interval, you can say, okay, cool, that's a minor second. And the value of this is that when you hear like a chord or melody or a progression of some kind, like maybe you hear a progression that's like it starts at E and then it goes down like to here, and then maybe just around, that kind of thing. And it goes places. And just whatever. And you hear say, okay, if this starts out in the one, then you can say, cool, then it goes to the three because it's a minor third away from it, and then it goes back down. And for this particular purpose, it's usually easier to think of everything as kind of having a tonic around in the middle, and then instead of trying to be like, okay, it goes from this note and then it goes so far interval down below. Although if that works easier for you, you can do that too. Now you heard me throw around those numbers, that idea of the 1, the 3, and the 5, and that kind of thing. What the hell does that mean? It essentially just means what number in the scale it is. So if I were to put down the major scale, we would say that there's the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, and the 1 again, because it's just there's the 1. And those are what's referred to as scale degrees. And so the idea is that like you have your 1, and then you can say, cool, first note is the 1, and then you play some other note, and you go, cool, that's the major 6, one of the major 6, and then that's how you know it was a major 6 of an interval. And that, having all this in your head, which you might think would be too difficult, but if you look at it, there's really only so many of them, and you're not really worrying about so much about identifying what note it is and then the next one. That's why we think of things in terms of like the scale of degrees, saying the 1. We don't actually care what the root note is. We can figure it out later, if you don't have perfect pitch. People with perfect pitch will just know, but if you don't have perfect pitch, then you could just be like, the song's in a key, and then find out what key it's in later, and then you can remember, okay, cool, if the 1 is E, and then I know that the next note's a major third up, then it means the next note is G sharp, because it is so as many steps as the way it is to get there. The steps, by the way, there's a half step and a whole step. So determining how many, how far away a note is in an interval is mostly in a number of steps. It's helpful to think of it, I think, just in terms of half steps. For example, perfect fifth is 7 steps away, 7.5 steps away, which is useful to think about because when you're pitching things in a DAW, for example, you can see that it deals in cents and hundreds of cents and that kind of thing. And, well, a 100 cents is essentially a half step. So if you want to pitch something up a fifth, you got to pitch it up 700 cents. And an octave, 1,200 cents, that kind of thing. That's where all that is related. Anyway, the actual act of interval training, ear training your ears for intervals, is where you are played an interval, and it's your job to figure out what that is. And that one right there in that particular example would be a fourth, I think. Yeah, I was right. Anyway, there's actually a website that helps with this that I like throwing around. It's the website musictheory.net, which actually is a wonderful resource for a whole bunch of other stuff in relation to music theory. But one of the things I like about it is that they have a section on their website for interval ear training, where they will play an interval, and then it will ask you to guess. Well, tell you. It'll ask you to tell it what interval it was, and they'll tell you whether or not you were right. You do that a whole bunch of times, and eventually you'll just know what they all sound like. And like I said, it might seem like a bit of a daunting task to do that, but there really are only so many of them. And even the extra ones, which are just what happens when you have the intervals that go higher than the eighth, otherwise known as the octave. Because you might hear about 9 chords and 11 chords and that kind of thing. And that's just saying 9, 10, 11. Like, it just keeps going above the thing. Okay, because we have seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, that kind of thing, and then sevens, and then you have octaves, and then the 9 would be essentially the 2 on top of whatever root you are. And it's not something really to worry about, because what ends up happening is that you hear that not necessarily as being 9 steps away, but as rather being 2 steps away. And then you can just sort of logically be like, where you want your voicing to be, and then you can figure out whether or not it's a 9 or 2. I don't actually think the musictheory.net page has 9s and 11s in there. That's mostly a chord kind of thing, if you want to make 9 chords. Because you have your regular triads, and then you have 7 chords where you throw in a 7, and then I guess 9 chords where you throw in a 9, and 11, so on and so forth. You just kind of keep adding stuff in there until you have just a ridiculous voice stack, and that's how you get a cappella groups. So yeah, I'm laying all this out in this particular way because ear training, other than basic grasp of music theory is nice and it's cool, but just being able to identify what you're listening to and what you're thinking about in your head, because how shitty is it when you have a melody or progression in your mind and you have no way of just like putting that out there because you just don't know what it is, and then you start trying to like guess where it is, and then the act of guessing it just screws up where you are in your mind, and now you're never going to get it. So for this particular endeavor, being able to hear things in terms of intervals will definitely help you to be able to do that kind of better. And like I said, it's mostly if you do have a melody or a progression. And just like kind of keeps going whenever. The way that someone might say that to train to learn how to do it would be to figure it out. Say, cool, from here to here is a second, from here to here is a minor second, from here to here is a fourth of some kind, or tritone or whatever. Like that's how they would do that. But I really recommend thinking of everything as being an interval, like in terms of their scale degree. So we're looking at this being like, cool, from here to here is a major second, from here to here is a minor third, from here to here is also a major second. But when we listen to this and that, we're really hearing this and that, and then we get that's a 7. And pretty soon you'll get used to a lot of the quote unquote obvious ones, the one that show up a lot, like minor thirds, minor 7s, that kind of thing. Those will be, you'll just recognize those immediately. In fact, for a lot of you who have been producing music without really putting names to the stuff, we'll have all of a sudden have a whole bunch of names to put to these things about stuff that you pretty much already recognize. So that'll be a big help for that kind of thing. And then that's a 6. That's a 5. Minor 6. Perfect 5th. The 5th and the 4th are called perfect because they don't have a major or minor version, but they do have an augmented or diminished version, which will have almost no purpose in the MIDI world. This is kind of just sort of theory-ish ideas here. Music theory, and especially classical music, has a lot of rules about when you're in a particular key, what particular chords you can have, and what particular chords you can have before and after those particular chords. And it's the same way with melodies. And sometimes means like, even if you want to have a particular chord, you can't have it because it's against the rules. And they kind of cheat by doing things like having augmented and diminished things, so that you can still have something that's a 5th, but have it not be a 5th. So it's like saying, I really want to have that chord, but it calls for being this chord. So let's actually make it still that chord, make a diminished version of this chord. So it's still, you technically satisfy the requirements of having a 5th there, but it's a diminished chord, which gets you that. Which on paper will still look like a 5th. It'll still have the spacing on sheet music of the 5th. You just say it's just diminished or augmented. And there's even such things as double flats and double sharps, which are precisely the purpose for the same exact idea. The idea that you can't have particular notes in particular sequence because of just particular rules of whatever style that you're writing in. So they get away with it by saying, no, we're totally playing an A. We're playing an A, but it's just been double flatted, so that we're actually playing a G. And in MIDI roll world, a note is only ever the note it's ever going to be. So that means that those kinds of cheating just it's not going to be a thing. You don't care about what clef you're in. You don't care about what key signature you're in. You don't care about what instrument tuning you're using. Every note is just going to be the note that you're going to be using. And you put down a note being like, it's a G, it's always going to be G. You can't be like, no, that's actually a fucking triple flat B. It's, nope, that's a G. You see right there, it says G4. That's the end of that. So like the requirements of augmented and diminished chord structures are just not going to be a thing that you need to worry about. Unless, of course, you're involving like musicians and they need sheet music and that's how you want to talk to them. You can do that if you want to, but if this is the world you live in, like I do, it doesn't matter one bit. Yeah, so musictheory.net, pretty easy to remember that, and also a good place for other music theory stuff. If you want to go farther, I characterize music theory as it relates to electronic music production as a bit as to how calculus relates to physics, where in the very beginning of calculus, it's actually really cool because it explains a lot about physics and it's like neat and it helps you out and you learn a bunch of neat stuff. And then like you just keep going somewhere in calculus to the point where nothing you're doing has any bearing on reality at all. And music theory, the farthest reaches of music theory is kind of a lot like that, where you spend most of your time. It's actually a lot of history. It's really, it turns kind of into like a history study. But as far as the practical use of music theory, there's really not a whole lot beyond this and that other video that I talked about with the music theory video I did in the production basics course, which the whole reason why I did this separately is because people, I guess, miss this part about ear training, and it's honestly, I feel like ear training and this kind of thing is more important than any other kind of music that you might learn, just so that like you can recognize this stuff and have it. Like, it's really all there is to it. It really is. Like, and then later you want to learn about chords and that kind of thing, but that's a different kind of thing. And I guess actually, I mean, there is ear training for chords too, and that gets a bit harder because that means you need to learn a whole bunch of different names for stuff. Because like, you know, I'm gonna talk about the triads and then the 7 chords. And then all like is like, you know, certain triad with diminished whatever, and then add to and then like hearing that out of a giant stack is just really hard. And it's not something I ever did. However, I mean, and I guess it has been a little detrimental because there have been times where I hear really kick-ass chords. I just don't know how to do that because I haven't familiarized myself with what that chord actually is. And much like intervals, while there are a lot more combinations of chords, there are only so many that really are used on a regular basis. So I mean, depending on what genre you're doing, if you're doing some kind of weird jazz hop, that might be a wider selection of chords that you might use. Anyway, I hope this whole thing has been useful. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.